quarterback, tight end, defense rankings. If you need help at a position, hopefully I can help you out here. Quarterback, we're going to be going Allen Lamar. Now, this is supposed to be the highest scoring game of the week. You know, everybody gets upset when we talk about sportsbook projections, but I'm going to let you know they know more than you do. They know more than I do. They know more than we all do. And right now, they currently have the over-under of this game set at 50.5 points, which is much higher than the next highest scoring contest. You have both Allen and Lamar in offenses that want to run the ball. Like the Buffalo Bills had more rushing touchdowns last year than passing touchdowns, but they may not be able to here. Very rarely will you see one of these offenses as underdogs in a matchup. Obviously, you have to have one of them in this one. It is going to be the Baltimore Ravens, where the Bills are favored by about 1.5 points. If you draft one of these quarterbacks, obviously you know you're starting them. You obviously know you're starting either Jaden Daniels or Jalen Hurts if you have them as well. You currently do have the Philadelphia Eagles projected to score the most points in the league this week. But again, I'd expect that they are going to be running the ball over and over again. At least that's what I am hoping for. I am starting Saquon Barkley in the Flock League. I'm hoping for 200 yards. But he really only needs one for you to win on Underdog Fantasy this week, because Underdog for tonight's game is running two different promos: a 50% profit boost and a Saquon Barkley free gimme pick higher than half a total yard. And on top of that, if you're not already on Underdog, if you use code FLOCK, after you play your first $5, you're going to get $50 added into your account. On top of that, fill out the Google form on flockfantasy.com. We'll get an extra $10 added in your account. You can take advantage of all the promos they're running this week, and they're letting us do our special own Flock Pick'em Pack, where we are going to have a 5x opportunity if we have 230 passing yards from Dak Prescott, if Saquon Barkley scores a touchdown, and if George Pickens has fewer than 5 receptions. Link to Underdog is in the description, comment section, and there is no better time to get on there than today with all the promos they're going to have tonight and this weekend. Now, going over to our next tier, this is where maybe you begin to consider players. We have the Cincinnati Bengals projected as the second highest scoring offense in the league this week. We're going to have Joe Burrow ranked as our QB5. Obviously, the issue with Burrow in comparison to these other quarterbacks, he's not going to run the ball as much. The spread in this game is about 5.5 points, so it shouldn't be the biggest blowout. This should be tied for the second highest scoring game in terms of Vegas projections for this week. But again, the Cincinnati Bengals, they're fine throwing the ball if they're up in a game, if they're down in a game. Frankly, it doesn't matter. Our next tier, we are going to be led off with Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, and sneak peek later on. The Denver Broncos are going to be our number one DST this week. If we're looking at what Bo Nix did at the end of last season, well, yes, at the beginning of the year, maybe he wasn't phenomenal when it comes to the passing volume, but the second half, you had him with 29 fantasy points week 8. 17 in week 9, 16 in week 10, 29 in week 11, 19, 12, 13, 21, 22, and 33.5. Bo Nix turned into an every week option as your starting quarterback last year. This matchup against the Tennessee Titans is not scary whatsoever. I would assume that they're able to run the ball a decent amount, but they're currently projected out to be tied for the 5th highest scoring offense in the league this week. The one thing I want to see with Bo Nix this year is I want to see him run the ball a little bit more, where we did not have the rushing volume in the second half of the season like he saw at the beginning of the year. Now, going over and looking at what we have with Baker Mayfield, Baker's probably going to be a little bit of a letdown if you're expecting to get exactly what you had a year ago. Because last season, Baker Mayfield was incredible, where he was the QB4 in points per game. This is despite Chris Godwin missing over half the season. This is despite you also having a Mike Evans injury at one point. Now, for this first week, you're going to have Igbuka, you're going to have Mike Evans, but no Jalen McMillan, no Chris Godwin. The matchup against the Atlanta Falcons is great. Obviously, this team tried to bolster their defense in the NFL draft, but it looks like it may not have mattered, because you do have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers currently projected out, tied as the 5th highest scoring offense in the league this week. Now, Patrick Mahomes will be our next quarterback. With Mahomes, there maybe is a little bit of uncertainty with this being an international game, if you think that is going to be relevant. Now, for me, I haven't been able to do the historical research yet of how these games that aren't in Europe on a short week are impacting these quarterbacks in fantasy. The thing is, you don't have the short week. This is the opening Friday night game, so maybe it's not as big of a deal. The matchup going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, it should be relatively close, where right now you have the spread of this game being about 3 points with the Chiefs being favored. You have no Rashee Rice week 1, but honestly, I don't think it's going to be too relevant for Mahomes because you have our guy Worthy, hook 'em horns. Kyler Murray will be our next quarterback. Kyler Murray, massive spread in this game against the Saints. Obviously, they are heavy favorites, 6.5 points. So they should be able to run the ball in the second half. Now, what you're going to get with Kyler that you're not going to get with some of these other quarterbacks is going to give you some rushing upside. We can go ahead and we can look at Kyler Murray. Last year, he was at about 33.5 rushing yards per game. But if we go back to early in his NFL career, in year 2, when he was able to get to 24 points per game in fantasy, he was averaging over 50 rushing yards per game. So the thing is, hopefully Kyler's far enough removed from the devastating injuries that he saw earlier in his career that we can get back to that ceiling that we have from Kyler Murray, where occasionally we see 50 rushing yards in a game, 60 rushing yards in a game. And in a 4-point passing touchdown format, that's massive. Now, if you are streaming quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence is your guy. Because I already know Bo Nix, Baker Mayfield, Patrick Mahomes, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, and then the big 4, they were all drafted. But Lawrence is the best streaming option this week. Right now, the Jacksonville Jaguars are projected as 3.5-point favorites, projected out to be the 5th highest scoring offense in the league. And it's not like we're expecting this to be a team that's going to run the ball over and over and over again. This is a brand new coaching staff here. Obviously, they had a ton of success with Baker Mayfield last year. And you have Travis Hunter added alongside Brian Thomas Jr. as arguably a top 3 wide receiver duo in the NFL starting week 1. I think that this game is going to be much higher scoring than what a lot of people are expecting, just because what sportsbooks are telling me. And like I said, sportsbooks know more than you. They know more than I do. And they are currently putting the over-under this game at 46.5 points. And again, the Panthers are supposed to have one of the worst defenses in the league this year. Now, our next tier is going to be led off with Caleb Williams. A big expectation I have for Caleb this year, and maybe I shouldn't assume this, is I think we are going to see some additional rushing equity in comparison to what he had last season. Obviously, the offensive line is going to be better. The coaching staff's a lot better. The personnel's a lot better. And Caleb going into year 2, we would hope that we get some natural progression. But you go back to his time at USC, he was giving you 10 rushing touchdowns in a season. Last year, you just simply did not have that in Chicago. So we're hoping he can get back to it. This matchup against Minnesota isn't the best. Like, the Bears project to just be an average offense here, and the Vikings are favored. But I think Caleb's going to give you a little more rushing upside than what maybe you're going to have with Purdy. The Niners offense will be better, but I would just expect that, one, Purdy runs the ball just slightly less than Caleb Williams does. Purdy will still have some sneaky value on the ground. And at the same time, I would assume that Christian McCaffrey actually has a much higher percentage of the Niners offense than what we should expect with the running backs in Chicago with DeAndre Swift. Now, Jordan Love will be my next quarterback with Love, and we'll go Goff back to back. The Packers are favored by 2.5 points in this game. They are projected out to be one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. The question mark that you are going to have is, are they going to allow Jordan Love to throw the ball? Because we go back to what you saw with Jordan Love, his first year as a starter, when he was the QB6 in points per game, he was averaging 34 pass attempts a game. We go ahead and we look at what he was at this past year. He was at 28. So maybe it was just the lower body injuries that Jordan Love suffered last season that limited them. And they decided, you know what? We're going to try to play good defense and we're going to run the ball over and over and over again. But that could just be the identity of this team. And that could be what they're trying to do this year with the Micah Parsons trade as well. Because we go on the Detroit Lions side of this. The Lions currently project to have a lower implied team total than we have seen through the last 34 games of theirs. We have not seen the Lions project this poorly since 2022. You have an offensive line downgrade, coaching staff downgrade, and now we are looking at a horrible matchup against the Packers, where the Packers are going to have one of the toughest defenses to go up against this year. And we know Jared Goff gives you no rushing upside, and the Lions themselves are going to be trying to run the ball over and over again. I do want to reiterate, obviously, last year, the Detroit Lions were the number 1 scoring team in the NFL. But for my money, I would say that sportsbook projections week 1 are going to be a little bit more accurate than just trying to take what exactly happened last year and copy and paste it to this season. Now, Drake May will be our next quarterback. You have an applied team total of 23 points, which is right in line with all the quarterbacks we just talked about. Drake May showed you some rushing upside last season as well. My thing is, going up against the Raiders, I would assume we are going to get a considerable amount of rushing attempts for the combination of Trevion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson. I would assume that they are going to try to run the ball over and over and over again, and they should effectively be able to do so where they are favored in this game against the Raiders. Now, I understand a lot of people are going to say, oh, Dak Prescott's a sneaky play because the spread on this game's 8.5 points. He's going to have to throw the ball a bunch, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. The Cowboys project to only score more points this week than the Titans, the Jets, and the Saints. So yes, they have nothing on the ground. The Cowboys are not going to be able to run the ball. But going up against this Eagles defense, while we want to sit here and say like, oh, we're going to get garbage time Dak Prescott, that's going to be great. It may not matter if garbage time Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys aren't picking up first downs, aren't moving the chains, aren't making trips to the red zone. So I wouldn't want to start Dak. I wouldn't want to start Justin Fields either. We go over to the Jets-Steelers game. That game projects to be the lowest scoring game in the entire NFL this week. And you just had a significant injury to the Jets offensive line with their guard going down. Looking at McCarthy, I think McCarthy is a really exciting option given his weapons through the entire season. But week one, you're not going to have Jordan Addison. I feel like we could see this guy play at least one NFL game before we start him. Daniel Jones, sneaky good matchup against Miami. If you were just relying on sportsbook projections, Daniel Jones would be a lot higher in these rankings, to be honest. And if you're in a deep 14-team league and you need a streamer, Daniel Jones may not be bad this week because the Miami Dolphins have one of the worst defenses in the league. Going over to the next tier, I wouldn't be that excited about starting Justin Herbert, Michael Penix, CJ Stroud, Tua, Bryce Young, Stafford, Flacco, Geno, Darnold. Flacco, great matchup, no rushing upside. And a lot of these other guys don't have rushing upside. And Herbert, tough matchup. I would rank Herbert a lot higher than this in other weeks if it wasn't the Brazil game, specifically going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now let's go over to the tight end rankings. Tier 1, Bowers, McBride, Kittle. They are so far ahead of the rest of the tight end position that, again, if you're in like a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, if you see me review your team on the live stream, you know what I'm going to tell you. Hell, take a wide receiver, package it with whatever mid tight end one that you have, and do anything you can to get to Bowers, McBride, Kittle. They are going to dominate the rest of the field, and the value over replacement that you get is massive. Not even worth talking about the matchups. All 3 of these tight ends you could put in the flex if you play in a weird league where you don't have to start a tight end, or if you were a bad drafter somehow and you drafted 2 of them. Now, our next tier, which is a couple tiers down actually, is going to be led off with Mark Andrews. This is going to look very weird. I understand it. But again, very rarely are we going to be able to go into a week and know Lamar Jackson's going to have to drop back a bunch. The passing attempts are going to be real high in Baltimore this week. They're actually dogs in this matchup. That's never going to happen here for the Baltimore Ravens. It's happening this week against the Buffalo Bills. And we have no Isaiah Likely. So if you have Mark Andrews is a great play at tight end this week. Travis Kelce here as well. Trust me, I understand it's 2025. I understand that these guys are old as dirt. At least Kelce is. But with Kelce specifically, he will be a very exciting play at the beginning of the season before Rashee Rice comes back in. Once Rice is back in week 7, Kelce is going to drop at least a tier in these rankings, possibly even more. David Njoku will be our next option. Trust me, I understand. David Njoku's not ranked this high in my rest of season rankings. You look at the rest of season rankings on the website, you'll see that Andrews, Kelce, and Njoku are way lower than this. But Njoku, phenomenal matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. You have Flacco under center. Typically, the Browns are going to project to be one of the worst offenses, if not the worst offense in the league. But because the Cincinnati Bengals have the worst defense in the NFL, currently sportsbooks are projecting out the Cleveland Browns to outscore the Seahawks, the Raiders, the Steelers, the Texans, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Saints, the Jets, and the Titans. So for me, I think you can be excited about the passing volume for this week and this week alone in Cleveland. Now, Sam Laporta will be our next tight end. Now, trust me, I'm rooting for Laporta. I drafted way too much Sam Laporta in round 4 last year. I took him in round 4 of the Flock League. It was a horrible debacle, but he really came on strong at the end of last season. The issue is it's a really tough matchup going up against the Packers. This should be a week in which it wouldn't be surprising to see the Lions struggle. And Laporta, more times than not, is going to be tight end 4 in my rankings. But this week, I want to pump the brakes a bit. TJ Hawkinson was not good at all last year. Hawkinson was not usable. However, I drafted TJ Hawkinson in the Flock League, I believe in round 8. And I'm confident in him, considering 1, you have no Jordan Addison for the beginning of the season. And 2, now you are 2 years removed from the torn ACL, where I think Hawkinson should be at 100%. Now, our next tier, I may have to move Tucker Kraft higher than this because Jaden Reed did not practice on Wednesday. It's going to be super important to monitor their practice reports for all these players, including the wide receivers in their offenses. Obviously, I'm going to be updating the weekly rankings on the site every single day until Sunday. So if you got the season pass, you're good. Don't worry about it. But Tucker Kraft, if you have no Jaden Reed, is actually going to go up with the target share. Like, you don't have that deep of a wide receiver room here, considering all the injuries across the board for the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers should score a lot of points this week. Tyler Warren will be our next tight end. Tyler Warren, in my rest of season rankings, I have way higher than this. My rest of season rankings, I have him ahead of Andrews, Kelsey, and Njoku, and this is a phenomenal matchup going up against the Miami Dolphins. But typically, rookie wide receivers, I want to be a little bit hesitant week 1, and rookie tight ends, I would like to be very hesitant if we can. Evan Ingram will be our next option. With Ingram, I guess he had the big play in the preseason, so I don't want to say that. But again, looked very bad last year, past 30. The Jags moved on for him for nothing, but it's a good offense, not an established wide receiver 2 in it. Dallas Goedert will be our next wide receiver. Dallas Goedert, boring ceiling because the dude has never and will never score touchdowns. Like, the worst thing you could ever do is go to Underdog and say Dallas Goedert is going to score a touchdown tonight. But it's a high-scoring offense, projects to be the high-scoring offense in the NFL this week. Well, at the same time, you do have a very safe role here in a concentrated target share. Now, Dalton Kincaid will be our next tight end. Obviously, Kincaid's lower than this in my rest of season rankings, but should be the highest-scoring game of the week going up against the Baltimore Ravens. And Shakir was banged up in training camp. Loveland will be our next tight end. Loveland's higher than this in my rest of season rankings, but I wouldn't be that surprised if we saw a little bit of Cole Kmet early in the year. Kyle Pitts, love the matchup going up against Tampa, but at the same time, he is Kyle Pitts. Hunter Henry, no established wide receiver 2, and it should be a decent scoring offense here in New England. Jake Ferguson, I know that they're going to be in garbage time, but now you have Pickens to take targets alongside CeeDee Lamb. And again, this projects to be an offense that only outscores the Saints, the Jets, the Titans. And Zach Ertz, you're going to have a lot of targets, but you're going to have no big plays, and I don't know what the touchdown upside looks like. And then our last tier, I mean, you'd have to be very desperate. Jonnu, Strange, Chig, Otten, Pat Freiermuth, Dalton Schultz, nothing to talk about. Now, going over to defense, I know that you're probably streaming. Not if you have the Denver Broncos. What's hilarious is the Denver Broncos have the best DST this year. And at the same time, the Denver Broncos have a phenomenal matchup where they get to go up against Cam Ward with his first NFL game ever. So, they're in their own tier. Nobody would be better. I wish I honestly just reached on them in my fantasy draft so I could kind of get an easy win week 1. The second best defense is going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kind of went back and forth on this, but again, this should be the lowest scoring game of the week. And at the same time, you just had the offensive guard going down for the Jets, which should help the Steelers probably get to Justin Fields. And we know Fields can make mistakes. The Arizona Cardinals will be our next defense. I'm actually having to play against the Cardinals. Sal picked them up from the waiver wire. I thought that they were the best waiver wire streaming tight end based off the matchup here. The Philadelphia Eagles, honestly, I maybe should have ahead of the Cardinals because the Eagles obviously have a much better defense, amazing defensive line, able to get to the quarterback, and typically what you want when you are making waiver wire moves to grab your DSTs, when you're making DST rankings. And I know people will roll their eyes. They hate to see it because they think it's just a cop-out, but it's the most accurate thing you can do, is you want a DST that's heavily favored in their game going up against an offense that's supposed to score very few points. And why you want a defense that's heavily favored is you want the opponent's quarterback to have to drop back. Because how do you generate points as a defense? Sacks, turnovers. And you know what is way easier to generate sacks and turnovers with a Dak Prescott drop back rather than a Javonte Williams handoff. You want a lot of plays run by the offense. So honestly, the Eagles could probably jump up to our second ranked defense. What's brutal about the Eagles DST is like they have really tough matchups beyond this. I am going to be streaming the Commanders defense myself this week, going up against the Giants. Very similar to what we were talking about with the Eagles, right? You want a large spread. If we're looking at the Commanders-Giants game, Commanders are favored by 5.5 points. And at the same time, the Giants currently do project out to be the 5th low-scoring offense in the league this week. And it's not like we're that scared of Russell Wilson. The Jets, it's weird to have a team that's actually dogs in their respective matchup be ranked this high. But again, the over-under of this game is 38.5 points. There are just simply not going to be points scored. The Niners, you get to go up against Sam Darnold. Good team. Patriots, Rams, Vikings, Chiefs, Bengals, Jags, Packers, Colts, Bears, Seahawks, Raiders. Realistically, we're just going to have to see what happens with some of these defenses early in the season. I'd be lying to you if I were to come out here and try to pretend that I was some defensive expert and I tracked all the defensive player moves this offseason. I know the Steelers, Dolphins swapped a couple players. I know that Micah Parsons got sent to Green Bay. Outside of that, I'm a little bit clueless. I will say the Packers DST is going to be much better going into the future than they would be this week. Obviously, I don't like the matchup against the Detroit Lions, but the Packers defense looks like it should be one of the top options most weeks this year. But I really appreciate you. Really hope I was able to help you out. And again, there's no better time to take advantage of those underdog promos because week 1 is the biggest week for them. Free Saquon Barkley pick tonight, more than less than half a total yard. And on top of that, you'll get the Flock Boosted Pick'em Pack, which we're going to be doing for the Thursday night, Friday night, and Sunday night games. Plus, if you're new to Underdog Fantasy, you're going to be getting $50 added to your account after you play your first 5. And they have those 50% and 100% profit boost tokens dropping every single day for the big NFL games. But I really appreciate you. I'm going to leave the link to Underdog Fantasy in the description and comment section. I would love for you to ride with that pick for the Cowboys and Eagles game tonight with us. And I would love to see you in the live stream right afterwards so we can celebrate together.